Hi everybody, it's Laura from Reading in Bed, and I know what you're thinking. Why am I making a video? I never make videos. There's two very good reasons. One is that I am in a hotel right now, meaning that there are no children jumping around and screaming, and two is that I am going to be talking about Bone and Bread by Saleema Nawaz, which is the June pick for Hello Hemlock, a Canadian booktube channel. So I figured, why not make a video? Since they will be making videos to talk about this book, I'm going to make one too. Bone and Bread. I'm going to start out by talking about the title because I really love the title. It's got a couple layers of meanings. This is a story about two sisters, Bina and Sadhana. One of the sisters develops anorexia as a teenager, and one of them becomes pregnant as a teenager. So immediately the title sort of suggests something about their stories. Bone obviously for Sadhana, and bread, I kind of thought about rising bread and that kind of thing for Bina, who becomes pregnant. Bone and Bread also made me think of the saying born and bred. And that sort of made me think about, is this going to be a story about immigrants? Is where people were born important in this story? And yeah, it is. So we have a lot of immigrant stories in CanLit, and this is sort of one, sort of not one. Like the title suggests, by sort of making a play on words, it is about various immigrant stories, but it's a little off-kilter in some ways. And our main characters, Bina and Sadhana, were born in Canada, so they are born and bred in Canada. It's people kind of surrounding them that immigrated to Canada. The main thing that I liked with this book was the relationships and the realistic portrayal of those relationships. I'll get to the sisters in a minute, but one thing I really liked is that both the sisters, it's not just about their relationship with each other, they also had relationships with family members, they both had jobs and go to school. They had circles of friends and not the same circles of friends. I find often in books, family stories can be very insular, where all we see is the immediate family and just the main characters, and we don't see them kind of interacting with other people as people do in real life. Of course, the relationship between the two sisters is sort of the main thing. It's the main thing driving the story, driving my interest in the book. And what I liked is that with the two sisters, you could never tell what arguments were going to be grudges that would last years and kind of drive a huge wedge between them, and which arguments and challenges would just be forgiven immediately. And that felt really realistic too. In real life, it's not always, you don't always see it coming, whatever straw is going to break the camel's back. It could be anything, and that kind of plays out here with the sisters kind of, sometimes they're super close. They like literally sleep in the same bed for a lot of their lives, and then sometimes they don't speak to each other for weeks or months at a time. The other thing I liked about the story was the diversity, and I don't just mean that there's diverse characters, because we have Bina and Sadhana, who have a father who is Sikh, and they have a mom who's from Ireland and other places. But we get into some kind of, typical, well, not typical, but teenage girl issues like anorexia, teenage pregnancy. And it challenged me because I kept having to remind myself that the girls weren't white, which sounds kind of ridiculous. But and when I sat down and thought, like, why is this hard for me to remember? I think it's because all of the stories that we hear, and particularly about eating disorders, are white people, white girls, young white girls who are trying to live up to some ideal, image of femininity, and that's not what this is. This is sort of, it really shows the intersections between culture and mental illness and eating disorders and that kind of thing. And it's not something we typically see. It's not the dominant narrative. So I appreciated that, and I appreciate it being challenged in that way. The last thing that I want to talk about that I liked in the story was that it was compelling. There is kind of a mystery aspect to the story. It's not a spoiler to say that Sadhana dies and Bina is trying to find out kind of the circumstances of her death. But it wasn't really that compelled me. It was just the more I got to know the sisters, the more I cared about them. And I just, I didn't really care about finding out what happened to Sad Hannah as much as I just wanted to see how Bina was doing, how she was coping with it, how she was going to deal with like kind of tragedy upon tragedy that's in her life. So I guess in a way you could say the mystery aspect didn't work that well for me, but the characterization and the relationships were so strong that it still kind of made this book very easy to read. Despite being really slow to start though. The first 100 pages or so I found pretty slow, and I know a lot of people would abandon before the 100 pages were up, so if you do try it, try to stick with it past kind of that 100, even 150 mark. The only thing I didn't really connect to very much in this book was the writing style and the voice, which sounds worse than it is, because I mean, if you don't like the writing style, how do you like the book? But I found the book was written in kind of a poetic style. You might call it a lyrical style. I don't use that word because, like, I don't really know what that means. It just makes me think of song lyrics. But there's a lot of like metaphors and similes, and they're often sort of unexpected kinds of metaphors. If I had the book with me, I could quote you something, but you'll have to take my word for it, I guess. And the thing with all the poetic language is it didn't feel like it fit Bina as a teenager. It seemed too old, and it didn't seem to fit Bina as an adult, because I felt like Bina was like such a realist that it didn't really ring true. It's just the voice didn't match the characters. I had such a strong sense of the characters, and yet a lot of the writing didn't quite match what I had in my head, I guess. And it just sort of felt like, they were really trying to say something profound at the end of every chapter, or even the end of every page or paragraph in some parts, and it's like I just didn't feel like that was needed. I felt like it was a good story anyway. The characters were good anyway. I didn't need it kind of hammered home with sort of these superfluous poetic lines. And at 450 pages, I mean, like, that's not super long, but it's not super short, so I kind of, for me, I think it could have been edited a little bit and made a little shorter. But again, this is just really a matter of taste. Some people are going to read this kind of writing and just love it. I love this kind of writing in other places. There was something that didn't kind of mesh for me in that way. But overall, I have a really positive impression of this book. Obviously, I'm still thinking about it. I wrote lots of notes about it. I'm making a video about it, so that's going to tell you something right there. I'm going to be reading The Mystics of Mile End pretty soon here, which is kind of interesting because it's also a contemporary novel set in Montreal, set in the same neighborhood of Montreal, Mile End. And so maybe I'll have something to say about how those books work together. We'll have to see. Thanks for watching, and thank you, Jason, for inviting me to be part of Hello Hemlock this month. And thanks to all the booktubers out there. This was way harder than I thought it would be, and I thought it would be pretty hard. So keep up the good work, guys, and you can visit me at Reading in Bed. See you later.